Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circle flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die.
Death is the ultimate unifier, the ultimate equalizer. We all die. You, me, everything. The statement takes a small leap of faith. You are not an immortal hiding amongst us, who's watching the progression of humanity waiting for the day to reveal yourself, and lead us into the future. But like I said, a small leap. You're probably not this person, right? Unless. Or even an immortal tree frog would throw the previous statement into the bin of falsehoods, but that's somehow equally as grandiose, just not for us people. Well, most of us, I should say. Today's topic is death. Dying, not being alive. Despite being one of those noble truths so ingrained in the human experience that it happens to everyone, not much is actually understood in the concept itself. Well, more aptly, what happens after death. Death, or being in the state of dead, is what happens in the absence of life, but it's more complicated than that. Rocks are absent of life, but they never died, so the premise is simply more than just life not being present. Cars have windows, and houses have windows, so it's something else moving the cars entirely. To experience death, one must experience the act of dying. These, and many more like these, are all topics we'll be exploring going forward. But when it comes to less specified themes like death, life, hope, the works, a start point always eludes me. There's so much to cover in so little time, or in some cases, unique perspectives to offer. Another inner struggle I've found myself combating lately is insignificance. Who the fuck am I to talk about these things? Who am I to deliver absolute truths in the form of a story or exposition, nevertheless in 24 still images a second? But that's not what this video is about. Maybe the next one, but not this one. So where do we start? Well, in all my insignificance, I'd like to start with how normalized death is, and I suspect that's because that's one of the most natural things there is, but it seems to teeter on the line of reverence and an everyday occurrence. Something so a part of what it means to be humans, but so profane. We see it every day. Maybe not real death, but the depiction, the performance of death in movies, TV shows, our own lives, and other people's sometimes. In passing, no less. Did you hear that Joe died? Joe who? We witness death in media, but without the character's background, they just seem like some Star Trekian red shirt. Cannon fodder for the narrative to progress, to demonstrate that the straits are dire. But logically, that person who was just launched into space had a mother, a father, ambitions and dreams, maybe even to be captain one day. Yet their death seems much less impactful to the grand scheme of things compared to Data, our lovable yellow-eyed android. It's become, or maybe, no, that's not right. It always has been such an everyday occurrence. Life is expected, it's anticipated, planned for, though sometimes accidental. We know where it's coming from. Death, on the other hand, could be around any corner, down any path traveled or risk taken. You won't wake up in your sleep to a crying baby, congratulations by the way, but you could pass on, and dear God, what's that about? We know we'll die one day, but it's kept at a healthy distance unless it's directly impacting the characters whose background we do know, or close friends and family in reality where all this is really happening. Other than our own personal lives, we can shrug it off within the moments we hear of someone's death. Let's be honest though, it's the only way we could get through this whole thing called life anyways. I find life is best encountered through the perfect mix of callousness and compassion in order to avoid even the slightest reminder of our own agony and despair. Otherwise, as the kids say, the horrors would be, como se dice, persisting? Dying is just as strange universally as being born. However, as strange as it seems, it's just the order of things. So we tell ourselves, part of that persisting horrors mindset. Who knows? We could all just be doing something wrong that causes death, and it's not just something that happens. It's ingrained in our awareness or self as higher thinking beings. Everything has a beginning and an end. So it's an indisputable fact. And that right there, I reckon, is the reason for all this what seems like senseless death in our media. How many guys did John Wick kill? 100? 200? 300? I'm betting there were maybe 8 genuine bad guys, and the rest were just hired muscle who were limited to career options based on past mistakes, making employment difficult, leading to further development in the lives of crime, and that they didn't feel passionately about the bad guy's agenda but were treating it like an everyday 9 to 5, similar to Jokic and basketball.
And now you are an NBA champion, Nikola. How does that feel?
It's good. It's good. The job is done. We can go home now.
Congratulations.
Exploring the concept of murder is a whole other can of worms, but the immoral implications behind causing death are vast and deep. Either way, I would say there's only a few options where causing a death is okay, but life's not black and white, and the gray is where humanity meets reality. Death is heavy because of its permanence, its finality. Once you die, it's lights out, at least on this end. It raises so many more questions for the concept to be the final answer. You're here. Your body is, at least, for a time, but where did you go? Are you trapped in your body? Did you leave us behind for a paradise in the afterlife? Does it matter how you die? Does that change things for post-death? What if it all goes black? Nobody remembers what it was like before they were born, but it's that sensation of that there was time before you and now there will be time after you. Do you get another go-around, but because of how human brains work, you have no memory? But then is it really the same you? And if that's the case, where did all these new people come from, including myself? We're all waiting down here with bated breath for a sign of something more. It's the world's best kept secret, and we're all literally dying to know. Okay, pretty good, right? This here, all of this, life, could just be phase 1 in our long journey of consciousness. Is there just another Earth 2 waiting for all those people who have passed, living it out as if it's common knowledge like being alive now? Do they die again? Have we died before? Boundless questions and none of the answers. We know dying seems unpleasant, unexpected, and painful in some cases, but a sweet release in others. On a primal level, we know causing a death is a burden no soul would want to live with if you're well adapted and suited for the world stage, but sometimes life requires these difficult choices be made to those unlucky few, if it was even a choice to begin with. We as people know this to be the case. The leading cause of death the last 100 years was infection, tuberculosis. Murder isn't even in the top 10. Cancer, heart conditions, and then it gets interesting again with the external. Well, what is external? In some cases it's suicide, in others it's drug overdose. Sometimes it's accidents like being crushed in an incident, but murder is notably absent. We as people are trying to prevent as much death as possible, but sometimes we cause our own because it stands to reason you can't just pause existence. Another quirky thing we do is personification. We include death in our media. No, not that death. Yeah, him. Or her. I don't know. Let's count the ribs. Oof, actually, maybe they identify as something else. Point being is, death has been given shape and form through our depictions of what we imagine the avatar of such a fundamental force were to look like. Death is represented by an animated human skeleton, cloaked in black and carrying a scythe to reap the souls, another concept we'll discuss. Why black? Well, because it's obvious. Death is black, anger is red, or sadness blue. We're not here to explore color psychology, but a quick side note, isn't it fun to personify natural phenomena into identities? Like gods or avatars, god of the sea, god of the sun, having their own unique physical appearance. Why do we do such funny little idiosyncrasies? History dictates a lack of understanding tends to fill its own gaps, but more importantly, I think by personifying death into a grim reaper, it's not so much an unavoidable force in the universe, but rather a thing that can be parlayed with, or more importantly, hidden from, if not possibly defeated. So far, as we opened the video with, nobody has defeated death. Well, except for maybe that one guy. Oh, and that other guy, but the first guy seemed to do all the work, like a group project. And before his 60-minute debut, he up and vanished when the world needed him most, without sharing the big secret. Referencing back to media, in the film Seventh Seal, 1957, written and directed by Ingmar Bergman, a knight, Antonius Block, and his squire, Jons, are on a return voyage from the Crusades. Upon entering their homeland, they discover the plague has ravished the lands. On this journey, Antonius encounters death while walking a beach, a personification of death at least, who says though during Antonius's crusade he has been beside him, his time has come. This encounter leads to a chess game where Antonius barters with the figure that as long as the game continues, death will pass him by, or in other words, allow him to continue living. A few moves are made on each party's turn. Antonius continues his voyage with Johns, leaving the game to be continued. On the pair's journey, Antonius and Johns become more enveloped in the current ongoings of the land, namely at their first stop of a church, undergoing the installation of a mural. Johns has taken a more direct approach to dealing with the Crusades, perceiving them as senseless violence not perpetrated by God, but cruel men. Johns references how Antonius' mind was filled with toxic ideals later on in the film by one man in particular, leading to both men leaving their wives and country for a battle no real God of creation would want them participating in. He loosely quotes the muralist, "The Crusades where he was bitten, poisoned, and slaughtered for the last 10 years were so stupid, only an idealist would think of it. God is not an idealist." This squire is definitely not a good guy by most standards. Clearly his moral compass has been affected by the war, but who could blame him? He does, however, have redeeming moments, as his own battle isn't against death, like Antonius, but against man, and more specifically, the wickedness of man. The ongoing battle is also against himself to no longer be a wicked person, not because of God, but because it is the human thing to do, to walk the middle of the road, not as a saint, and no longer as a crusading demon for those wicked men. Johns departs the church after crudely painting a caricature of himself, declaring, "Here is Johns. He grins at death and scoffs at the Lord, laughs at himself and leers at the girls. His world exists only for himself, absurd to even himself, meaningless to heaven and no interest to hell. His faith is lost, but his humanity is the only real thing he had to begin with that remains." Antonius' issue, on the other hand, is that he's lost his faith in God, but in other words, he cannot lose his faith in God, but the fighting, the senseless war has changed him. In the church, Antonius approaches the confessional window where he unknowingly begins confessing his doubts in God to death. He begins confessing that he wishes to confess, but in his heart, it is all empty, all except for a mirror where a reflection of himself is present, but the reflection only fills him with fear and self-loathing. He feels as though he's been severed in connection to his fellow man. He lives in a world of phantoms, a prisoner of his dreams. Death inquires, "Yet you don't want to die." Antonius confirms that he does indeed wish to pass. Death follows this by asking, "What's stopping you?" And Antonius looks into a statue of Christ, saying he'd like to know. Death quickly, but cruelly states, "You'd like a guarantee." How are we to believe the believers when we don't believe ourselves? What will happen to all those who want to believe but cannot? And what of those who neither will nor can believe? Why can I not kill God within me? And why does he go on living in this painful, humiliating way? I want to tear him out of my heart, but he remains a mocking reality. I want knowledge, not faith. Not assumptions, but knowledge. I want God to stretch out his hand, uncover his face, and speak to me. But he is silent, says Death. I cry to him in the dark. No one seems to be there. Perhaps no one is there, says Death. Then life is a senseless terror. No man can live with death knowing that everything is nothingness. Most people never reflect on death, or nothingness, says the guy's Death. One day they'll stand at the far edge of life, peering into the darkness. Ah, that day, Death says, almost smiling. I understand now, returns Antonius. In our fear we make an idol and call it God. Antonius begins to delve into the inner workings of looking back on his life, saying he has done nothing of substance. Not saying this out of reprieve or self-pity, but he imagines most men would say the same. He wants one good act before he can greet death with open arms. Death then inquires on Antonius' chess strategy, to which he's tricked into giving. He states, "You tricked me, but we will meet again, and I will find a way out." Death departs. Antonius is frightened after this conversation, but looks down on his hand, realizing this is his hand, under his own agency, and he himself are facing death in a chess game, and winning no less. Continuing on the two's journey, we see the test of resolve from the two men, with John stopping senseless acts of violence and further bearing witness to the depravity of humanity when faced with desperate times. Antonius even encounters a supposed witch taking pity on the poor woman before being shooed away by the clergy, something both Antonius and Johns have thoughts on, negative ones at that. A subplot of the film is that an acting troupe composed of 3 members who perform esoteric songs and dances are going through their own strife, but are also closer to God than any supposed holy men. even bearing witness to the presence of the Virgin Mary teaching her son, Jesus, to walk as an infant. While preparing for his second bout of chess, Antonius encounters this couple with their baby from the troupe outside the town where they were performed and shares strawberries and milk offered by the couple. Later, Jean shows up, and the actor notes that this man had saved his life, which he did when the townspeople became depraved, led by one individual who Jean's already had a grudge against, as this was the man who primarily instigated Antonius into joining the crusade. Jean had stopped the instigator, marking his face with the brand of a scoundrel. Antonius states how his loss of faith all seems so unreal when sitting here in the moment, enjoying these earthly pleasures with an actress and her husband. How insignificant all of a sudden. I shall remember this hour of peace, the strawberries, the bowl of milk, your faces in the dusk. Michael asleep, Joff with his lute. I shall remember our words and shall bear this memory between my hands as carefully as a bowl of fresh milk, and this will be a sign and a great content. Antonius returns to a second game of chess, almost a changed man. He smiles and laughs in the face of death. The action isn't unwarranted either, putting the deathly figure into check. The two entities are truly enjoying their game. That is until Death states to Antonius, "Are you traveling with the actors and their son through the forest?" Antonius asks why, to which Death retorts, "No reason." While preparing to leave the village where the troupe was performing and the Crusaders encountered them, a third subplot where one of the actors from the troupe, who was not part of the couple, stole a man's wife, unfolds into Act 2. Prague is seen crying at the local pub, and Johns consoles him. The man eventually asks to join the group on their travel, to which Johns agrees. On their way through the forest, the group encounters Prague's wife, Lisa, and the actor who had stolen her from him. A conflict arises, but eventually Prague realizes he's no real killer despite all the previous dialogue. But the actor states that he truly believes that he has done wrong, then all he has to do is push, while holding a blade above his heart. Prague says the man isn't openly doing anything right now to Lisa, who is goading Prague on to kill the man, but he can't muster it. The actor walks into the woods, stating he truly is a pox on this earth before stabbing himself in the heart on his own volition. Prague, John, and Lisa confirm their suspicions and see that the man did indeed kill himself. Lisa says there is no need to grieve as that he wanted to die, but Prague asks John's isn't life, but he doesn't finish before John states yes, but best not to think about it right now. The group leaves, and as they do, the actor allows the prop knife to return to its original state. He had faked his death. Climbing a tree to rest for the night, Death appears and begins to saw it down. As the group travels further through the forest, they encounter an entourage of men pushing a caged cart. Inside is the witch from earlier, and she is set to be executed this day. The group traveled with the men until reaching the execution grounds. There, Antonius begins to question the girl, asking if she really speaks with the devil, to which she says she does. He wishes to talk to the devil as well, to speak to God, to speak of God. The girl tells him to stare into her eyes and she will see him. Antonius sees nothing, and the girl responds that she does. She sees him everywhere and feels him in her grasp wherever she reaches out. The girl's hand is crushed. Antonius continues to try and get answers out of the girl, asking the men why her hand has been bashed, to which they respond, "Ask the priest." The robed priest is Death. As the girl is finally being prepared to be set on the blazing pyre, Antonius slips her a drink that will dull the pain. Jeans appears and says he thought of killing the men, but the girl is already more dead than alive. As the girl is placed on the inferno, a look of realization consumes her face, and does it Jeans and Antonius. There is no devil here, just a very sick girl. More notably, however, Antonius will not receive the answers he's looking for from Satan or this poor girl. The group moves on. As the group rests, Antonius sets up his chessboard for the final match. Death appears, asking, "Shall we begin?" Antonius' queen is taken, a rather vital piece if you're unfamiliar with chess. The husband from the acting troupe, who was prone to visions, as mentioned earlier, by witnessing Mary and Jesus, sees the game for what it really is. The actors choose to escape with their son, and Antonius noticed this, stalling the game and drawing Death's attention solely to him. Death asks Antonius if he's lost interest in the game, but he says quite the contrary, actually. Death says he looks anxious, scared even. Antonius responds, "Nothing escapes you, does it?" "Nothing escapes me," he confirms. Antonius says it's true, he is anxious, and Death responds, he's scared. Before the move can be made, Antonius knocks the board over with his cape, stating he doesn't remember where the pieces went, but Death does. Resetting the board, Death states he's realized something interesting. Antonius asks, "What's that?" Death simply replies his next move will put the knight in checkmate. I'm fairly certain Death cheated in this little maneuver, but Antonius is glad to see partial of his companion's escape and thinks nothing of it, and faces defeat in the game that's been going on this entire journey. Death asks if he profited from his respite, and he confirms that he did. That pleases Death. Death then says he will leave him now, but next time he comes, Antonius and his entourage's time on Earth will be over. The actors now traveling through the woods encounter a tremendous thunderstorm where the husband states that the shadow of death looms over them, larger and imposing. Antonius, John, Prague, Lisa, and a mute girl John picked up along the journey arrives at his former residence, Antonius's. All the people Antonius once knew are all gone except one, his wife. She welcomes him back and they embrace. I suspect in this moment, Antonius has temporarily lost his fear of death, his fear of the absence of God. The group enjoy a dinner, and they receive 3 knocks on the door. Jean answers it, but no one is there. Returning to the table, Death has appeared down the hall. The group each has their own unique reactions. Antonius prays, and Jean takes his death along with his housemate he saved with dignity, with maybe a sly remark, but is told to be quiet by Antonius's wife. Prague and Lisa give brief introductions of who they are, and the mute girl says, "It is finished." The scene fades. We return to the actors and their son, who made it out of the forest and the shadow of death, or the storm. In the distance, the husband sees a vision of the once companions dancing in a line with death into darker lands. The couple smiles as they continue their journey, and the film ends. I bring up the seventh seal, as it's full of allegories and metaphors, and in topics of uncertainty, what better tools are there available to convey such themes? In addition to creative associations, I find that the characters are often slices of the pie when it comes to examining how each of us perceive death, or impending death for that matter. The characters also have unique moral standpoints when dealing with everything in between life and death, that I think really determines their mindsets. Death, despite the illusionary narrative of the seventh seal, still acts as an unseen force rather than a person that could be around any corner, or in any way be bargained with, but ultimately comes for us in the end. It's the brief respite of finding enjoyment in life, eating strawberries and drinking milk with those we cherish or find enjoyment with, that, if only for a time, give us a relief from our fears of death, allowing for us to laugh in the face of certain demise. The film also talks about the fear of death, something some characters deal with more than others, but inherently isn't the fear of death, but rather a symptom of the fear of what happens after death. Antonius mentions that in the church, the fear that nihilism instills in him, and that he is unable to kill the part of God inside of him, but needs some form of concrete evidence before he is fully able to accept his fate, which I believe he finally begins to see again in other people. Death in the final moves of the game states he knows nothing of the existence of God, and with the girl who claimed to see the devil but in reality was just ill, gives us a glimpse into the theme of the movie that no answers for what's beyond death lay for us on this mortal coil. I think acceptance of death lies in unique answers specialized for all of us. Jean had accepted death long ago, most likely during the time of the Crusades. However, this only deepened the question for Antonius, who felt hollow, as if he had done nothing with his life of noteworthy, or in the name of God. That is, until he is able to save his friends and their innocent son. Other characters like Antonius' wife was fulfilled when being reunited with him, and I think all truly accepted their fates at the end of the movie, simply from the fact that they were all together, similar to how they were during the time before the second chess game. I conclude my thoughts on the film as I really wanted to use examples and themes of the story to demonstrate archetypes surrounding death, and also reference our use of death in media in a rather famous example, no less, to broaden our conversation, and not to give a full breakdown of the seventh seal, something I inadvertently did. In the end, I'll say this: Antonius could have been immortal, traveling the earth alone, but without his experiences, I doubt he would have ever come to terms with death, attributing his final actions to the resulting friendship and one good deed he performed. Immortality has been the desire of many who suffer from the human condition. I mean, think about it. Surface level, of course. How cool would immortality actually be? What would it look like? Can you still die of natural causes, old age withstanding? Conquest after adventure after regular quest. The search for eternal life has been ongoing since day one, and with no solutions to date. Thus, the hunt for immortality goes on, with surprisingly more answers than questions from when we first started. Where's the fountain of youth? It doesn't exist. Does mercury make you live longer? No, the opposite, in fact. Even Walt Disney and soon-to-be Elon Musk have kept their heads frozen and chilly because the answer hasn't made itself apparent to us mortals yet. Is immortality possible? Probably not. No, definitely not. I'm confident in saying that one. Transhumanism aside, death is scary and immortality isn't the fix-all for dying, but the feelings of fleeting time, a byproduct of death itself. Referencing earlier in the video, death could be around every corner, and only if you're lucky will you make it to somewhere around 80 at most. My great-grandmother lived to 102, and that's 20 extra years, so that's pretty good, and she never smoked and maybe occasionally drank, but in the end, she was happy, and I think that's the secret. I smoke and drank, but sometimes I think I get so caught up in my expectations for myself I am actively shearing years off my life more than any beer or cigarette could by not fulfilling impossible standards. The secret to long life seems to be leading a happy, fulfilling life and not becoming overindulgent in vices. Only then will you keep the reaper at bay for a time. With this next example, I think we should look at a very bizarre man, Brian Johnson. In the case of Brian Johnson, he would like to live forever, but first a brief history lesson. A man lives and then he dies. Johnson was born in Provo, Utah, to a mother and father as a middle child. Raised in Springfield, Utah, he was raised Mormon, quite the shocker, and went to BYU, where he would spend 2 years in Ecuador on missionary work. This is quite the unique life, by the way. After college, Johnson would found numerous startups, but the one that we should take a focus on is Kernel, a company dedicated to creating medical analysis hardware and conducting studies on Alzheimer's, aging, concussions, meditation states, and strokes. A New York Times investigation surfaced that Johnson had been using confidentiality agreements to control his public image. Workers have come together to share their experiences since. Johnson has since lost his damn mind, in my opinion, and in no legal terms, and all the allegeds. Please don't sue me. I suppose it all started in 2021 when he announced his anti-aging journey with Project Blueprint, undergoing extensive medical procedures like plasma transfusion from one of his own kids. He has since stopped doing these infusions due to so-called lack of benefits, but I think, as we'll talk about, is very concerned with his public image. He now follows a very strict diet and lifestyle with a regimented day full of exercise, no coffee, no drinking, no fun. Experts have since come out, since his journey began, stating the results Johnson has claimed are unlikely, and that he could be exaggerating the actual numbers in which he's slowed aging. Andrew Steele, a longevity scientist, has come out with the claims that genetics play the largest role in determining a person's lifespan. Netflix has a documentary coming out later this year called Don't Die, The Man Who Wants to Live Forever, which is a dumb title because I'm sure he's not the only person who wants to live forever. I also, from how Netflix does documentaries, don't think it's going to portray him in a very positive light. I'm not going to show you any more interviews as I don't wish to violate YouTube's infamous copyright policy any further than I can handle with the 7th seal, which is probably a lot. But you should watch one when given the chance. As playground insulty as this may sound, he's just a weird fellow, an oddball, and a bit, dare I say, an egotistical narcissist. The biggest question I'm left with is why? Not why live forever, but what makes you so special that you think you should live forever? I'm a big believer that we are in the time we are for a reason. Personally, I want to grow old with someone. I want to experience a natural life the way it was semi-intended. If I went back to the time of the Crusades with Antonius and told everyone there people were pretty regularly living to 100, it would make us seem like gods. This isn't a Brian Johnson roast, but if I were to psychoanalyze this man, I would say his life is not going how he intended, and for some reason, he thinks more time will give him the fulfillment he's been searching for. He fears death, and is concerned with his public image, so much so that he's willing to silence others to keep this health guru vibe he's trying to establish, even though it's a farce. He doesn't seem like a good person, and the fear of death speaks loud. He believes himself so special, such a chosen one, that he can be the first person to freeze his lifespan. Or, hear me out, he's a grifter. I mean, for God's sake, he's already gotten the documentary. Like saying outrageous political opinions and poaching on tribalism or rage-baiting reactions out of others, Brian Johnson could just be doing all this to add to his infamy or just general fame when it comes to tech bro community and transhumanist. I strongly believe each possibility is just as likely. Death is a fundamental force in the universe, and despite how everything and anything is possible, something deep in my soul tells me that avoiding death just isn't one of those things. We're all meant to be here, because at a certain point, statistical anomalies such as our own birth merge with the grounds of fate and predestined events. If you've learned anything from my ramble, it's to enjoy life and not fret over the supposed condemnation to a heaven or a hell, but to be good to people in the best way you can and what your circumstances in life allows you to be. Death will not parley with you over a game of chess, and the grim figure could take you even in your most solemn moments of peace along friends. It's difficult, if not downright impossible, to accept death in most cases, but find solace in the fact that it's your life's experiences filled with treasured memories that makes even the fear of the inevitable become distant. It's a constant reminder, and there's no point in dwelling on it. On the off chance there's nothing more awaits for us, live to the fullest, and death will remain far away. Memento mori. Peace out.